You may forget where your cell phone is or why you went into a room. It got rid of that.
Yeah.
But then, moms often know data like how many ounces of baby
Oh,
formula
yeah.
they're giving their children, how many diapers they're using. They're like, you have to make room for that in the brain for these new set of skills that make you a better parent and help that little one thrive.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's going to be a little rocky, but it's normal.
About 3 months after my son was born, I was ready to have some conversations with adults. I wasn't working at the time, and my husband was bartending nights, so my days were all baby, all the time. Which was great, but thankfully, though, my days of running restaurants and catering companies lended itself perfectly to part-time work. So I got a job 3 days a week in a wine store. It was glorious, but I found out rather quickly that I was not the same person I was before having my baby. There were 5 rules the wine store had about discounting the wine. 5 rules. I could not for the life of me remember what they were. Every single time I went to ring somebody up, I had to ask what the discounts were again. It was so confusing. Why couldn't I remember the damn discounts? There were only 5 of them. Thankfully, my friend Jen, who ran the store, was super gracious and never made me feel badly about it. In fact, she kept telling me it was okay because I had mom brain. I had heard the term before, but I really never gave it any credence. My mom had used it all the time growing up, when she left the grocery list on the counter again. So, is mom brain real, or is it just a cop-out? And does it get any better as your kids get older? And if it is real, why did evolution do this to us? My name is Sarah King, and I have some questions about mom brain. So the person who is brave enough to answer all my questions this time is, again, Narissa Price, MD. She's a psychiatrist with Wake Med here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Let's just dive into this because when you become pregnant, your brain just becomes mush.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, can I just say one thing that I want us to rebrand this mommy brain idea?
I am for it. Let's hear it.
Okay, because I do feel like, we have this perfect ideal of what moms should be. And then when they seem to fail from being perfect, we have to label it in some way.
Yeah.
When in fact, women, you are perfectly designed. And of course, your brain changes with pregnancy. Your body changes as well to prepare for the baby, but your brain does as well.
Well, in what ways?
So what people talk about, the scientists talk about, is neuroplasticity of the brain, is that it goes through a process of getting rid of, pruning even some of the neural connections we don't need anymore.
Okay.
And enhancing the ones that we actually need to take care of our young.
Is that what neuroplasticity means?
That's what it means. It means that the brain goes through this change.
Okay, interesting.
And so, yeah, you may forget where your cell phone is or why you went into a room. It got rid of that.
Yeah.
But you remember, where your baby is.
I hope so. Although I've met a few people who've left their kids in the living room when they got in the car.
I can see that from time to time. That makes sense. But then, moms often know data like how many ounces of baby formula they're giving their children, how many diapers they're using. They're like, you have to make room for that in the brain for these new set of skills that make you a better parent and help that little one thrive.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's going to be a little rocky, but it's normal.
So you don't think it's brain fog?
No. I mean, I understand what people mean when they say brain fog.
Okay.
And certainly there could be reasons where you may genuinely be having a brain fog. For instance, insomnia.
Yeah.
Where you're not sleeping as well. Sure. You're
just not as clear.
You're not as clear.
Yeah.
And there are some major hormonal changes that really do affect the way the brain processes.
Okay.
But again, I'll say it again, it's normal.
Yeah.
It's
well,
normal.
tell bosses that. I remember when I mentioned this in the intro to this, but I'm going to tell you, when I started working, my son was 3 months old, I worked at a wine store.
Yeah.
I was like, this is easy. I used to sell wine. I know wine.
Mm-hmm.
They gave me 5 pricing things to remember.
Mm-hmm.
I could not remember those 5 things to save my life.
Yeah.
And so as women, when we get back to work,
Right.
we're not the same person, yet
You're
they
not.
expect the same person to come back.
And that's the problem.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like the conversation needs to change.
Right.
Is to make room for these changes because, again, the individual is now focusing more on the child. And that's a good thing for our society, right?
Yeah.
And that there may be a period of change where you kind of have to adapt and learn strategies so that you can remember those 5 things.
Yeah.
Maybe you're keeping up with more to-do list or
Yeah.
writing things down
Yeah.
more. But it's still normal.
Yeah. Well, you keep saying there'll be a time. So does that mean it will eventually go back to normal? Quote unquote pre-baby?
So again, these are massive changes that have occurred to your body and to your brain. So
right.
You may not look like the teenager that you did once before.
Well, let's not get into the body thing.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think, and again, that's where I feel like we have unrealistic expectations of moms that you somehow are perpetually that 17-year-old girl.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and there's benefit, believe me, to the 17-year-old body. I get that.
Oh, yeah. We all get that. We remember.
But there's benefit to the 26, the 35, the 40-year-old mind as well. The experiences that you understand, the way that you look at problems and can solve them in a different way. And so it's the same thing. It's just, I think we just need to have a little bit more self-compassion.
Well, that kind of leads me into my next question, so the advantages of mom brain. What would be what could we look forward to?
Exactly. So that's what I'd like it to be. So they're superpowers. Like, for example, as a mom, you probably can tell the difference between a cry if a baby is hungry versus they're in pain versus they just miss you.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Like, that's amazing, right?
Yeah.
That you're able to interpret those little subtle nuances in a cry. And so I think it's important to pause and remember, or not just look at the things that you feel like are negative that you may have lost, but look at the things that you've gained.
Well, I feel like that's true in any change, any large change, because there's always going to be, well, these are the things I can't do anymore.
Right.
So don't focus on what you can't do. Focus on what you can do.
What you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What are the actual differences between a brain of a woman who has gone through pregnancy versus a mom who has not gone through pregnancy?
So I'll say that there's a lot of research that needs to be developed to really understand that.
Which is crazy to me because people have been pregnant forever.
And that half the population are women, and there should be more studies with women. And so some of these answers we don't completely have.
Yeah.
But there are some studies that suggest that there's some women who have children may have differently different cognitive abilities than women who have not had children.
Okay.
And so, but again, difference doesn't necessarily mean bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really, if there's one thing I wish that many people would do for their mental health is to have more self-compassion for what and who they are, to embrace who they are. There is a line that may cross where I might be more concerned about an individual. Like, again, if they feel like this is more than just mom brain, but maybe they're finding themselves crying all the time.
Which was me. I had postpartum.
Exactly.
And I think it's more common than people think.
It is incredibly common.
Yeah.
And if they're not functioning, like they really aren't taking care of the baby in the way that they really
need
to, then I would say we need to have a medical professional.
Well, and that's the thing. So for me, the signs were subtle.
Yeah.
Aside, I did cry, but mine was all body based.
Yeah.
Because I thought I wanted to breastfeed and I couldn't. And going into pregnancy, I was like, it's fine if I can't, not a big deal. But whenever I came out of it, I was like, man, if I was a caveman and this baby was alive, my baby would be dead because I can't breastfeed him, which is insane. But that's what I was thinking.
Sure.
And I was like, well, that's just me, rationalizing in a weird way. That's not postpartum. What are the signs that we need to be looking for postpartum?
So a lot of times it's what you described, kind of these irrational worries, like this anxiety that you really can't let go of.
Yeah.
And
I still think about them.
And again, to some degree, I think, that is welcome to parenthood 101, that you are going to now worry about someone more than you have ever worried before.
Correct.
But is it getting in the way of you fully enjoying your life? Is it getting in the way of you functioning, even as a parent. You're so crippled, in fact, or disabled by your anxiety, your worry, that you don't even want to touch your baby because you're worried you may do something that's not really good for the baby.
Mine was rage. I had major rage issues, which I've never experienced rage. And I have more compassion for people who do now because it's uncontrollable.
Exactly.
When it hits, and I'm like, where is this coming from?
Right.
So things like that, when they pop up and you have literally no control over them, that's something that you need to be worried about.
That's a reason I would want to talk to a medical professional.
Oh, that's good to know. This is a thought that I have about a lot of things in life. How did mom brain make it through evolution? How did we get to here with us being so forgetful throughout throughout life? And I feel like it gets worse. And then I have found, because my son's 7 years old now, so I'm a little better than I was, but I'm still not the same person. So how did this win out evolutionarily speaking?
Well, again, I'm not an anthropologist,
but you're a psychiatrist.
But I have my theories. And my biggest theory would be that this actually is very consistent with evolution, that evolution works to get rid of the weaker,
Yeah.
But the fact that you're surviving means that you passed the test.
Okay.
You made it. And so the things that you're not remembering really are not necessarily vital to survival.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
I mean,
washing the dishes is not essential.
It's not. It's frustrating. So
Yes.
I feel women when they try, and it's a real thing. I'm not trying to poo-poo it. But it's probably not as vital to your survival or for the little ones.
The survival of our young,
which is kind of the whole point of evolution, is to make it.
Another frustration that people find with mom brain is the fact that their partners don't understand it.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It is. And there's a whole mental load. Do you deal a lot with that in your practice?
Absolutely. And it seems to be getting worse, like the load that mothers in particular are expected to take on. Again, I feel like, this is a problem in our society, and it's not necessarily a problem with women, but a problem with our society, that we have this perfection model. That's the only way, that somehow women are supposed to do everything.
Yeah.
And
be beautiful, be sexy, have a clean house, do the yard. These are all things I worry about.
That's right.
My son needs to be well dressed, clean, polite.
Yes.
And I can probably get away with the first one, but I want my son to be clean and polite.
Sure,
that's important.
It is.
But yeah, it's a lot.
It's a lot.
So do you have any tips for women who have mom brain?
Sure.
I know you said self-compassion.
Right, I do.
And so how can I cultivate more self-compassion?
Yeah.
And maybe, do you have any tips on building memory?
Yeah. So for self-compassion, the way I think about it is, imagine yourself as a friend who's struggling. What would you say to that person?
That's good advice.
Because I think we are sometimes our worst enemies, and we're hateful. We say stuff in our brain to ourselves that we would never say to other people. So just for a moment, if you find yourself kind of spiraling or feeling really down about yourself, to pause and say, now, what would I say to a friend of mine who is going through the same thing?
Right. That's great advice.
And that might kind of stop the spiral with that. But with the mom brain, again, it's real.
Yeah.
And so it may mean that you may need to write down things to remind you, or have little alarms on your phone. Yes.
I've written down lots of things.
Very
and
nice.
thing, don't even look at the today. This is a calendar. My today is crowded.
Very much. So get a cute book. That stuff's probably cute.
Oh, it's cute.
Get a nice writing pen. Really celebrate.
Yes.
That you have a strategy that really can help you function well. And that it's okay. And then I think also it's helpful to really have honest conversations with friends and families too.
That is a great piece of advice, because I find even at work they make fun of me for the list that I keep. And I'm like,
no.
Yeah. I'm like, yo, you don't know. My house looks great. You been to my house? See how clean it is? That takes work. We go on vacations. You know who plans those? I do.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, and it all takes list making.
It does. And so it's and then more importantly, I think it's important for you to say that to yourself, that's okay.
Yeah.
That you need that. That's okay.
I love you.
Aww.
Thank you so much for coming in. I feel a lot better about myself. I hope everyone who's hearing this feels better about themselves. Yes, I did take notes and make a list of all the things I learned with Dr. Price. Mom brain's a real thing. We told you. Sarah Has Questions is a production of Capital Broadcasting Company. My guest today was Dr. Narissa Price, a WakeMed psychiatrist. To find out more about her or any of the other providers from the WakeMed team, go to wakemed.org. If you have thoughts about any episode or questions you want me to ask in a future episode or ideas for an episode at all, send me a message in the link. You'll find it in the show notes. Thanks for listening.